use the facilities in the classrooms for meetings and that kind of thing after school. And they can use the library for like checking out books for the community. And they could use the outdoor areas as well for like the YMCA or Little League.
Designing a school of the future opens up new vistas for students and new visions of what schools can be for educators, planners, architects, community stakeholders, everyone involved in building and using schools.
Kids get it. They understand that the learning environment is improved if they have good lighting and good heating and cooling. And it's only common sense that if you have adequate lighting, that students will be able to read better. If the ventilation is right, if the heating and cooling is right, they won't get as drowsy.
What begins with a concept will eventually become a real learning community, from the innovative use of its common spaces to the 7th graders watering the garden on the roof.
I didn't really think about it that much because I was always at home just watching TV. This actually got me out of my house, and I could learn about all the different issues going around and how you can actually help them change.
It was really fun to be in the club and get to make like the model and use Google SketchUp.
What I know for sure is I know how to do the math now, and I understand the words that most architects do.
I can actually visualize this program as an academy within a school, where students will have an opportunity to learn, use every intelligence and every skill they know. If we want them to know algebra, math, science, they have an opportunity to learn it as it applies to something that has meaning to them. And when you have that, you don't have to struggle for students to be engaged in a classroom. They are going to be.
I read a great quote at the zoo actually the other day. It was, "We have not inherited the earth from our parents, much less they are borrowing it from us. So we really are the future of our planet."
Ladies and gentlemen, CFPI President Merle Kirkley.
Good morning. Good morning. You notice I don't have that dance in my, I don't have that step in, that's the old age factor comes in for me. So welcome everybody this morning. Mukund just said to me, wow, what a great crowd. Looks like there's as many or more than yesterday. So they're excited to get up here and speak. I hope you had a great day yesterday. Did everybody enjoy yesterday? Let me know if you did, please. And I'll tell you, if you enjoyed yesterday, you're really in for another really exciting day today, starting with this morning's session, and then going from here over to the exhibit hall where you will have some fantastic learning experiences and also being able to visit all of the Expo booths and see some of the fantastic products and services and new innovations that our 133 exhibitors have to show to us. Remember this, that one of the big things of a conference is if we don't have industry partners coming at our booths, we have a pretty hard time making money on a conference. So please make sure you spend this day in that exhibit hall. And as you know that, remember this, today is going to be, we have our new old mini sessions called, I keep forgetting it, it must be the age, learning conversations, they just told me and I forgot. That we're really structuring it a different way this year, that they're in the exhibit hall, and you're going to have, each person's going to do it twice, but they'll do it, you're going to have 2 sets. So all day long in the exhibit hall, you will actually be able to see all of those sessions that you want to have discussions on it. So I think you're in for a real learning session today, in addition to being able to see all the great service and products. I'll tell you, you just saw an amazing, amazing school building week video. I have to tell you, I'm going to tell you some of my personal experiences with school building week. If you want to have a week in your life that I think literally will change how you look at maybe planning and designing and constructing buildings, you need to see School Building Week. We brought in, and we hope this year we're, coordination because we're an international organization. We're hoping this year we can even have some international members that will contribute outside of the U.S. and Canada. But I'll tell you this, that when you spend a week with these kids, and I don't know, on the video you saw in Imago Dei Middle School. By the way, these are 5th, 6th, and 7th graders from that school. 17 kids, one person started as an independent school district, Tucson, Arizona. It's in the front of a massage parlor. This was started by an Episcopal minister who said, I want to save one child at a time from poverty. And here they made the finals, and they didn't have the tools of some of the other kids, which were just fantastic, but they had the same passion for realizing what they want as a school building. And so for me, to getting to know them from when they walked in Monday night to when they left on Friday, not only were they became friends, they became friends for life. And the amazing things they have designed. We have a 6th grader who designed a rainwater recovery generator. So when you're like in Seattle where we have rain all the time, that we can now trickle that down, and he has a windmill generator to design that we can now use it in the house. And he patented it. But he's in the 7th grade, so you don't expect much of those kids, you know? And so I will tell you, I hope that this year, and I know the Pacific Northwest region and all the other regions are really saying they're sending this out, and they're trying to get more schools involved. And I know our chapter in Washington already has got 3 or 4 or 5 interested. So I would tell you, take the time, get the video, get out in your regions and chapters, and get them involved. It will be an experience you'll never forget. And nothing is, our partners in this. I'll tell you, the National Association of Realtors have put not only human capital, but they've put their dollars behind where they stand. And as a result of that, that and all our other building partners make School Building Week just a phenomenal experience. Last year, we had over 140 compete. This year, we need 400. So let's get out and get that done, that you will be able to join us in Washington, D.C. for that final competition. It's going to be absolutely fantastic. It is what you enjoy it unbelievably. Our day today, of course, is that we have the sessions, we have the expo tonight, we have the presidents, we have the sunset celebration up here on this pool deck, which I read it. Did any of you read the email John's been sending out at night? Somehow there was a rumor in there that I might do a cannonball. False rumor. Not that I don't have the gut to go make a good cannonball, but I am not unless somebody shoves me in. By the way, why would I make a statement like that, for God's sake? Because I see about a dozen of you, including Steve Young, that will push me in without me even realizing it. I have to tell you, we are in for another 2 days. And for those of you who think, well, you know, Thursday's the wrap-up, remember, tonight's the off-site celebration. But tomorrow, we're going to do a wrap-up, and Stephen's going to be back. And we're going to take all we learned over these last 3 days, and we're going to put it together, and Sue is going to, in the end, we're going to summarize it with a panel and questions from you so that you'll be able to take back, and we're going to have people up actually taking notes in summary so that we can get it out to you about what you've learned to propel you for the next year, ideas for your next regional or chapter conference. So it's going to be a fantastic day tomorrow. We then have our amazing school tours, and by the way, here, there's some amazing schools. Oh, High Tech High. How many of you liked the High Tech High kids yesterday? God, they are amazing kids. They're way over my head, I can tell you that. They're really academic. It was just amazing. We have that. We have our foundation golf tournament. And don't forget, after you've had this review, and the test is then Thursday night at the graduation ceremony. Well, not really a test, but you know. We would like to have you there for the graduation ceremony, which is on Thursday night. And then we all go out and we spread the word of what we've all learned here over the last 3 days. It's going to be fantastic. And you have been a fantastic, all of you yesterday, your comments to me about what you learned yesterday were just phenomenal. So let the learning continue, because that is what we're about, and we have listened to the learners. And let us continue that for the next 2 days. Now, be sure to check the reader board for the latest information and room assignments. That's those, reader board, the kiosks that we have. Also, the advanced certificate students and instructors of our San Diego State University will meet in Madeline C at 4:30 p.m. today. Don't forget, when you go into the exhibit hall today, you notice out front we had those classrooms of the future. Take the time to stop and go through those and see what we're doing and what people see as classrooms of the future. Take the time to do that. Our engaged learning sessions will start at 10:45 a.m. Now for the day. Wow, I tell you what. We are an international organization, and one Mukund I've gotten to know over the last year and a half, and Alastair I've met and had a chance to talk to a lot. So I'm excited for them to be here today. They are just absolutely phenomenal speakers. Mukund Patel, he's the chief officer for educational infrastructure for the GEMS Global Education and Management Systems, the world's largest provider of private schools in the Dubai, United Arab Emirates. At GEMS, Mukund is responsible for establishing new schools with an emphasis on providing innovative buildings with excellent teaching and learning environments. Alastair Blyth is a policy analyst for the program on educational building, the PEB, which we have a relationship with, at the Organization for Economic Development Corporation, and that is the OECD, which we are really excited to have a new relationship with. His main focus is the role of innovation in design to meet educational needs and to support better physical learning environments throughout the world. Please help me welcome to this stage this morning Mukund Patel and Alastair Blyth.
Thanks. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, Mal, for that kind introduction. And I'd like to thank you and your colleagues at CFPI for organizing what is proving to be a really very successful conference. And it's great to see so many people here today. I think when we used to organize conferences in England, we were lucky if we got 70, 80 people. If we got 100, we were really thrilled. So clearly there is a lot of interest in education here in the United States, which is really encouraging. And I think it's only by sharing our experiences at conferences like this that we are going to make progress. We need to learn about successes of what other people are doing, which is working, but we also need to learn from other people's mistakes as well, so that we don't end up building buildings and then realize 2 or 3 years later that we wish we had done things differently. I'm going to be talking about Dubai and also about UK, because that's where I was based for many years, so you've got to keep up, right? I'm going to be talking about experiences in both the countries. I'm sure you here in States, as in England and a lot of European countries, face huge challenges on education side. Let me give you one example. In England, this August, when the results came out for the 16-year-olds, 40% of them failed to get even C grade in 5 subjects. They study about 10 to 12 subjects. C grade is not a very difficult or a challenging target, but they couldn't get 5 Cs. So, we are really failing a lot of pupils here, right? And we need to think about how we can engage them in education. In past, all of that might not have mattered that much because the economies were strong in our countries, and they got jobs and they had careers, fulfilling careers, But now I think things are getting very different because of globalization. We know about all the job transfers taking place, outsourcing to places like China and India. And so I think people who don't have the right skills and the right education are going to struggle. I think the current hiccups in the financial market might slow down the processes of globalization for a while, but the forces that are at work will reassert themselves, and I have no doubt that globalization will gather pace and for next 20 or 30 years at least. So real challenges about, what do we do to equip our children? And where I'm sitting in Dubai, we are really in the thick of it. We see globalization in the whole region there. But there's another revolution going on as well. It's not just the globalization of economy. What we are seeing is globalization of education. Middle-class parents, emerging middle classes in India, China, Malaysia, Singapore, they all want just one thing for their children. They want them to have the best education. The demands for schools, international schools providing British, American curriculum, international baccalaureate is exploding. And we get, I kid you not, we get at least one request a week, somebody saying, do you want to set up a school in Malaysia? Do you want to set up a school in China? In Vietnam, we are looking at 2 or 3 sites where developers want us to set up schools. And middle-class parents in those countries want to educate their children so that they can compete to get those jobs which are going to go to these countries, right? We do market research for various countries as a company before we go in and build schools. And for one country, the market research by a well-known international company showed that 42% of the parents in that emerging economy were willing to pay more than a third of their disposable income towards their children's education. So a really high commitment to education here. So the question we have got to ask is that 40% of our pupils, how can we ensure that they've got the right skills to compete in that job market? You imagine a 5 or a 6-year-old today entering the education system. When they come out of that system in 2020, 2022, the world will be a very different place. And they will still then continue working beyond 2060 or 2070. In that period, they would have to change careers at least 3, 4, or 5 times, right? And they won't be able to do that unless they have got skills and the flexibility and adaptability. And I think what we have really got to get across to the pupils is learning is not something you do up to the age of 16. A lot of them can't wait to get out of school. They think, education is finished when you leave school. Really, we got to get across a message. This is a lifelong thing. It's going to go on. It's not an event, if you like. It's a journey which is going to go on forever. And I think some of you might remember Alvin Toffler, the futurologist. He really summed it up very nicely when he said, the illiterate of the 21st century won't be those who can't read and write. That is a given. Everybody will do that. But it will be those who can't learn new skills. So against this background, what can we do? Most of us involved in facilities. How can facilities help here? I think they can have a real impact, especially in engaging those currently who are not engaged, if we do the right things. Now, there are lots of things we could be doing, but I'm going to keep this short, right? I think one of your past presidents, Teddy Roosevelt, at the end of the First World War at a conference, he unveiled a 14-point plan to ensure world peace. And the French president who was in the audience was heard to murmur, even God had only 10 rules. Well, I'm not Teddy Roosevelt, and I'm certainly not Moses, right? And I'm sure you are bright. You can handle a lot of things, but I'm going to keep it to just 5 things. If we do 5 things with our new buildings, I think we will go some way towards engaging those pupils. I think the first thing we've got to do is really make sure that we build inspirational, exciting buildings. A lot of school buildings are very institutional, they're very boring, they're dull, Let's build places which have a sense of identity and a sense of pride, right? This is a school in north of England, in Blyth, a very deprived community. This is the only secondary school, and the city fathers said, we want a great building here. That was the brief to architect. The building is absolutely loved by the whole community. It's got cyber cafes, it's got nurseries, sports facilities. I think if you build a good place, then I think it sends a message, somebody cares about these buildings. This is our proposal for GEMS American Academy in Singapore. It is going to be a very, very distinctive building, a very special space. Arguably, schools are the most important building in a community. So I think they ought to be the best buildings, really. Yesterday, I think there was a pupil from High Tech High, Megan. When we asked her, what sort of place would you like your school to be? And she said, I would really like it to be a place where I can hang around. And I think that is the ultimate test, that they wouldn't want to leave the school. And it's not just about an iconic building. When I talk about inspirational spaces, buildings, I also talk about places inside as well. It's things like circulation areas, a lot of our schools, long, narrow corridor, double-sided classrooms, very depressing places. This is a school in Germany where, you can do things in a circulation area. You can display work, but you can even do some work. Halab, we saw yesterday, amazing school. I mean, you imagine the kids doing assembly, sitting on the staircases. It's fantastic for them. And this is a new school, building School for the Future project. In England, really a lot of daylight going deep into the building, good lines of sight, good lines of vision. People can see what is going on in schools. Circulation areas of which you can have breakout spaces. These are not just rendered images. Schools like this are being built. This is Maidstone Academy in England. The auditorium is actually open to the circulation. If you are practicing drama, you can see as you are going from one class to the other what's going on. Too much of education is hidden behind those in little black rooms, and I think we have to expose it more to the rest of the school and to the community as well. Another school in England, fantastic breakout spaces, those little mushroom-like things where you can sit with your friends and you can beaver away doing your assignments or whatever. This is our schools, a new school in Dubai, James World Academy, a very distinctive building in a very bland desert landscape. And inside, a stunning circulation area, spiral staircase, big space in the reception ground floor where, again, groups of pupils can sit down and be doing some work. And then inside, really wide corridors, breakout spaces. This is the kindergarten area of that school. This is another one of our schools being currently built at Jebel Ali Racecourse in Dubai. A stunning atrium with a lot of planting as well. We hope to have a biosphere type of a planting. In Dubai, it'll be absolutely fantastic, where the vegetation, there's not a great deal of variety. And I think it's not just circulation areas, but it's also other social spaces. Dining areas, for example. A lot of schools in England, lunch hour is completely chaotic. Whatever they are doing in the gym, they'll clear everything out, they'll put out the tables and the chairs, they'll have 2 sittings for lunch, and then they'll clear everything out again so that the gym can be used in the afternoon. Children queue up often for 15, 20 minutes to get food. And we all like to eat in nice places. Shouldn't the school dining areas be nice? And this is a dining area at a school in Finland. It's open most of the day. You can go in there anytime you like, get coffee or sandwiches. Really bright, airy space. Another dining area at a school in England where the kids got so fed up of their dining that when they were going to be redesigned, they said, can we talk to the architect? And they actually worked with the architects to get internet type, cafe type of a dining area. There was of dining in this school. If you ask children what they want different in their school, the survey puts at the top of where the one improvements are dining spaces, circulation spaces, and toilets, and areas like that. All right, we can do new schools, which are great, but let's not forget refurbishment. We are not going to rebuild all our schools either. And some this school, where the corridor, you can imagine the corridor, a really sort of long, narrow corridor, 1.5 meters wide. A lot of bullying used to go on, and the architects briefed through the wall, and use of color and everything completely lifted up the atmosphere in that corridor. So I think there's a lot that you could do with existing buildings as well. Moving on then, building, I think the second thing we really need to think really hard about how our buildings enable personalized learning. A lot of schools still operate the 19th century model. Assignments are set, this is really now getting to be very outdated. I think the education is moving from the teacher center to the child center. A lot of the stuff on the left confining of the schools of the 60s and 70s. You knew there was algebra on Tuesday afternoon. You didn't like algebra, and you were not looking forward to it for the, from the morning, you know. And from there, we are going towards much more mobile, flexible, interactive learning environment. In different by writing, but by doing things, by arguing, by presenting, and in many other ways. And the challenge for us is, how do we ensure that in our schools we give them different settings where a lot of these activities can take place, so that project-based learning or individual learning. Furniture is quite key to a lot of this as well. Screens that can be moved around. A lot of our schools don't have these sort of facilities at all. This school, the furniture is quite light. The pupils can rearrange the tables in the library in any way they want to. You know, they've got bin bags for sitting down. I think if you have these sort of things, then children can regroup in different sizes, you know. This is a project room in Jumeirah College in Dubai. A place where 8 or a 10-year-old, 10 pupils can sit down, work on their project. This is a very business-like environment, you know. It's got all the technology there as well. This is commons in one of our schools. Again, children sitting down, having a coffee or a donut, working with their friends. You know, kids love this sort of settings. This is a whole of a 14, 15, 16-year-old, a generation who have been brought up with friends, with Starbucks. You know, they like to sit down with books, with computers, and sort of discuss work. And let's create some of these spaces. This really came home to me, that the children learn differently to the way, at least I learned, when my son was in high school. When he used to do homework, he would always have his music player on in his study. And I used to say, look, you can't concentrate. Why don't you switch it off? And he just wouldn't listen. And I said, I gave up in the end. And I said, I'll watch his grades. And of course, he got good grades. I was brought up, you know, you mustn't have any noise, TV off, no radio, concentrate on what you're doing. But these kids are not like that. They can cope with, they can multitask, you know. So let's give them spaces where they can do this. This is the second half of the commons on the left again, where they can sit with their friends, discuss work, or just relax. And when you're talking of personalized learning and settings, let's not forget the outdoors, right? Those pupils who are not engaged in school, some of them, you take them outside and are transformed. They like to be in fresh air, you know, and this is great. This is sort of blurring the boundary between indoor and outdoor. You open up the big sliding door and you could be sitting outside, even if it's raining. Or go out right into the ground. Most places, most countries, you know, at least for the part of the year, you can do that. And I think we ought to be encouraging our teachers and our schools to make a far greater use of outdoors for learning. Right, move on to the third thing then, which is a building that really facilitates e-learning. I don't think any of us could stand here and say where the technology will be in the 5 or 10 years' time when you consider what has happened in the last 10 years or 15 years. But one thing is for sure, the kids absolutely love technology. And I think what we have to do is to make sure that we use it in a way which enhances learning, right? ICT should be fully integrated into education now. It is not a tool anymore. It is completely integral to teaching and learning as books are. And the access to the computers should be everywhere. I mean, it goes without saying that schools should have interactive whiteboards, really good networking, and wireless. Wireless is a very, very important part of ICT, not just the buildings, but the school grounds as well. You also need other things. You need large spaces. This girl's in a city learning center in Bristol, programming robots. You know, many schools you would struggle to create spaces like this. You need to move around a lot of furniture before you can have a space like that as well. Or video conferencing. Again, this is a school in Cornwall in England. They video conference with schools around the world, with museums as well. With places like Monterey Aquarium, there have been video conferencing with them, right? And it's absolutely fantastic for children. And I think we're going to see more and more of these. So, you know, make sure that we plan for video conferencing in our schools. I visited a school in Finland last year, and there was this group of girls sitting somewhere near the reception, laptop, mobile phone, doing something. About an hour later, when after looking at some of the spaces in the school, was coming back, they were still there. So obviously they had colonized this space, and it made me think that if they like to work like that, then why don't we create spaces where they can informally just sit with their friends with a laptop in a library setting or wherever and do their assignments or their project work. This is another classroom of the future in England. And really the flexibility is the key here, that you can open up to get a bigger space, project work going on one side, and when you've done that, you can come around on the other side of the classroom, take your tablet PC, wireless, and you can be writing up your project. I think, as we think about what sort of spaces we need, I think we really got to think hard about how do we provide flexibility, because we can't be sure what's coming along in terms of technology. So for that reason, I think we need to provide a range of spaces, and also spaces from, say, 4 classrooms on that side to, in a few years' time, to go to the middle option, and then in 5 or 6 years, you should be able to do that. And if you have a lot of load-bearing walls, then you won't be able to do it. Then you would really struggle. You want to be able to be doing these things easily. So again, as we design schools, let's think about the structures which would make things easier to adapt these buildings in future. Absolutely love this. This is from Australia. A primary school was visiting a secondary school, and this boy obviously loved to show the young girl all sorts of things they are doing on the computer, on a wireless network, sitting in the playing field. I just said the one other thing on the ICT side. It's not just the hardware, it is the content as well. We should be building communities, virtual communities. In our schools, we are about to implement GEMS Learning Gateway. We have signed a major deal with Microsoft so that our pupils will be able to create their own websites, the teachers will be able to put their lesson plans, and all the pupils in all our schools across the world, pupils, teachers, and parents will have access to it as well. And we are really hoping that when something happens in one country, say floods or something in India, we'll create websites, people will exchange information and blogs, and it will really, the whole community will become live. For us, it's really interesting and easy to do because we've got schools in various countries, so we can bring them together. But I think you can do it in your schools. You can team up with other schools across the countries, in your own country and other countries as well. This is very, very powerful. We did a survey before we decided to go down this route because we were worried that would people have access at home. And we did a survey at our school in Sharjah. Sharjah is a poor neighbor of Dubai. And we found that 95% of the pupils had internet connection at home. So the issue of have-nots is slowly disappearing, right? And in our schools currently, some of them we have got a computer ratio of 1 to 4. And the new school, the one I showed in Singapore and Jebel Ali, we are designing, by the time they are finished, it'll be 1 to 1. It'll be a variety of desktop, laptops, and mobile devices as well. And once our GEMS Learning Gateway is implemented, then it'll be 24/7. Pupils who are working on assignments in schools, when they go home, they just log in and they can continue working, send the assignments to the teacher, who can mark them and return the scores to them and their parents as well, because the parents will be able to communicate with the teachers as well through the email. The fourth change that I think we should really be thinking hard about is how do we transform science teaching in our schools. I've singled out science because in England, at least, and I think in States as well, from the statistics I've seen, the pupils are voting with their feet. They're not doing science at advanced levels. The number of pupils doing physics and chemistry degrees has fallen. About 20 universities have closed physics departments in England over the last 15 years or so because there are not enough pupils just going into those subjects. And this is, for a long-term future, I think this is very worrying because science is going to be the key, I think, to a lot of economic development as well. And the reason a lot of people are not doing science is because I think it's not taught properly. Why are we still building 8 or 9 fully fitted out science labs in our schools? If you actually go and look at those schools, most of the time they're not using gas or water. It's just chalk and talk. You don't need 9 science labs in any school. So we did projects in a few schools, and it was really hard work. The head teacher was up for it, but the head of the science and the science teachers didn't want to give up their labs. We had to work with them, really show them how things can be done differently. And in this school, they agreed afterwards, yes, they needed only 4 labs, the purple ones. You need smaller rooms, you need science studios. But the key thing was, then they said they want a big space in the middle. And this was really great. The yellow space is about 350 square meters. It's bigger than 3 or 4 labs. But there you can reconfigure it in different ways. You can have 100 or 120 people if somebody is coming in to give a talk from outside. You can have smaller groups working at the either end. You can do large-scale experiments. That is what would make, I think, the science more exciting for pupils. Another school, again, they said they needed only 4 labs. And then the semicircular area is the incident center, which is quite a large space with movable screens. Something happens, a hurricane or whatever, you can put a lot of information panels on the wall. You've got projectors and screens there, video conferencing, and you can sort of do a lot of lessons and curriculum around that subject. The other thing we are doing with our schools in Dubai is also we're building in special features, at least one special feature in each school. James World Academy has got a planetarium, a 70-seater planetarium. This is not just for teaching about space. We are showing films on geology, on formation of Grand Canyon, on global warming, on DNA, human body. So it can be used for various subjects across the curriculum. Wellington College, another of our school, has got the biggest telescope in whole of UAE there. All right. And again, children, go and look at the stars, take photographs. And this is great. When you go towards the telescope, we have created a bit like a Star Trek Enterprise type of a deck here with minor interactive things they could do as well. And on the side is a video conferencing facility so that they could link up with telescopes in Hawaii. It's nighttime in Hawaii when it's daytime in Dubai, so it works very well. We can see images in real time. And the next step we want to do on science is our new schools being built in Singapore, India, and Dubai. We're going to have between 200 and a 400 square meter area, what we call a discovery zone, where we will have really large interactive experiments, the sort of experiments you find in museums. Why go to museum once every 2 years? Let's bring some of these things in. And in each school, we have about 10 of these. We can swap them around every year in our schools. We got a lot of schools in Dubai and India, so I think it might work there. So it's things like this where you can really change lands, move them around, or a wave tank. You can generate waves of different amplitude and then see how much electricity is generated. The light at the end lights up, and you can measure things. So, let's do some experiments on the large scale. Try and capture pupils' imagination here. Moving on, finally, the fifth thing is, I think, let's build sustainable schools. I think this goes without saying, really. The children are really interested in everything environmental. And I think if we build schools which they know is not having harmful impact on the environment, then I think we are sending the right messages to the future generation. And hopefully they will look after the environment better than the job we have done so far. It's not just about insulation and all of that. It's building in recycling facilities. It's encouraging them to either walk or cycle to schools as well. That school also has got natural ventilation. You can see the stack effect there. The material, again, all the wood is from sustainable sources. And harvesting rainwater. Again, I'm sure a lot of schools are doing it. But also, let's bring it out. Have digital panels which shows how much water has been collected. You can do a bit of the curriculum as well. If it rained for 24 hours heavily, over 1,000 square meters, how much rainwater you collected, you can have records going over a number of years. You can do some real science here. And also electricity usage. If you do the right things, then you can have meters, shows which part of the school, the kitchen, how much electricity is being used, what sort of savings you are doing. And again, you can build curriculum around it as well, the lessons around it. At this school in England, you can see this is a very sustainable school. It's got photovoltaics, really sort of natural materials. All the blinds were designed by the pupils. The architect really interacted quite a lot with the pupils there. And I think when you get it right, our kids absolutely love it. I think let's create some great schools so that we inspire them to really take a lot of interest in education. I think I'm going to finish there and hand over to Alastair. I suggest if you have got questions, that you hold them until Alastair has finished, and then I think we can take questions in one session. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mel, for inviting us to come and speak to you all today. And I must admit, as Mukund said, it's a huge audience. Quite often we tend to speak to much smaller rooms of people. So thank you very much indeed for coming along and staying to see us talk. What I'm going to do, and as Mel said, I'm from the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, and I work on the program on educational building. Now I'm going to say just a little bit more about that in a moment. But one of the things I wanted to do was to, first of all, just sort of reflect a little bit on one or two things from yesterday. I must admit, I was fascinated by High-Tech High, and I had some very interesting discussions with a couple of the students after our session. And one of the things that struck me was how much of an insight I got, more insight into what makes a better quality learning environment. And it certainly provided more insights on what I think is focusing us at the OECD much more these days, and that is, how does a well-designed school affect quality education? And actually, I just wanted to kind of show you a couple of quotes. And this first one, it was pointed out that in terms of providing us as providers of buildings, what do students want? Well, one comment was, well, create somewhere relaxing and bright so that you can open the windows and see out, you know, somewhere you want to be for 7 hours a day. Wouldn't we all like that in all our workplaces, of course? Here's another quote, a little bit more advice about what students in schools would like. A building that allows them to want to learn rather than merely containing the learning process. A building that allows them to want to learn. And it struck me that if ever you want a mission statement for a school building program, or brief, as we would say in the United Kingdom, that's probably as good as any. What I'm going to do this morning in the brief time that I have to talk to you is to say a little bit about the OECD, what it is, and a little bit about the Directorate for Education, which is the part of the OECD I work in, and then talk about one or two of the things that the Directorate of Education is doing in broader terms of education. So I'm taking a slightly different perspective initially from Mukund, and then talk about what we're doing on the program of educational building. Well, the OECD, it was established in 1961 as the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. We do love our acronyms, by the way, and I'll try and avoid as many of them as I can, but perhaps you'll forgive me if I don't always. It was a treaty-based organization, international organization, and it has 30 member countries. The US, of course, Canada, Great Britain, much of Europe, Australia, New Zealand, Japan, Korea, and Mexico. We also have 5 accession countries. Those are countries that are looking to actually join the OECD, and if they meet all the criteria, will perhaps do so sometime within the next five years. And they include Chile, Russia, Israel, Estonia, and South Africa. And then we have a range of other countries which are more closely engaging with us. Some of the bigger non-member economies such as China and India and Indonesia. So we're developing quite wide global links. The work that we do focuses really on statistics and indicators, and I'm sure many of you will have read at some point in the newspaper some comment about from the OECD on economics with indicators or data. We do as a forum for countries to talk about common areas of policy concern. Most countries cooperate with each other on many levels, and certainly many levels of policy. Trade is one common area where you often hear about this. And we have issues that we look at in the OECD. We look at economy, of course, fiscal, trade, environment, to name but a few. The organization is actually guided and run by a council of ministers from each government, each member country. And indeed, that kind of hierarchy further down in the organization as well. So we're very much guided by what the member countries want us to do. And the Education Directorate is we have a range of sort of subdivisions, and what I'll do in a little moment while is just to talk about some of those things that we actually cover. So the organization and development is about democracy and underpinning democracy. It's a very important concept in our charter, and we are actually based in Paris. That doesn't any stretch of the imagination, and technically, when I come on these events, I'm stateless. I don't represent any country at all, or at best, so anyway, moving on really to one of the areas of work that you may have come across in the Education Directorate. The program of international student assessment. Caveat, so far as I'm concerned, I don't work on this particular program, and so it's a very complicated set of statistics and indicators, as you'll see in a moment, and it provides some interesting insights. So I come here really reporting results that my colleague analysts and statisticians, and we have a lot of statisticians in the directorate, and economists have developed. So PISA, as it's known, it's a standardized assessment of 15-year-olds, and it's been run across 400,000 students across 57 countries. The idea is to assess students fairly near the end of their term of compulsory education to see if they've got the life skills that they need to fully participate within society. And so it's been developed by the member countries and participating countries in that program. And as I say, administered across now, most recently across 57 countries. And it's run every 3 years, starting in 2000. And the last one was 2006. And in fact, the data and analysis wasn't published until the end of last year, 2007. I mean, it is huge. The 2006 survey focused on one area, particularly on scientific literacy, and it's interesting to hear Mukund reflect on science. Scientific literacy, in other words, to what extent can students manipulate their information and knowledge and use their knowledge of science to explain phenomena and inquire and so on. And it established 6 levels of proficiency, if you like, in this, level 6 being the highest. And so to give you an idea of what comes out of a study like this, I've been given some information, just a little insight on the United States within this survey, within the context of this survey. And despite having a sort of similar percentage of students at the highest levels, 5 and 6, by comparison to the OECD average, there were some interesting other aspects of it. Just to explain, I know some of you may not be able to see this at the back. Indeed, the curvature of the Earth is probably affecting you as much as anything else by now. Yes, right. Level 6 is, I'll just briefly read it, or at least summarize it. Students can consistently identify and explain, apply scientific knowledge in a variety of complex life situations. So it's pretty high level. Level 1 is having limited scientific knowledge and being able to apply it in a few quite familiar situations. And the very bottom there is below level 1. So level 5 and 6. Level 6, the OECD average is 1.3% students. Level 5 is 7.7%. And level 4, 20, level 3, 27, level 2, 24. So most of the students are in that sort of bracket. And level 1, 14, with about 5 falling below level 1. For the United States, actually it was 1.5 for level 6, better than the OECD average. About 7.5 for level 5. So it's about on the OECD average. And it's fairly close to the OECD averages, level 4 down to 2. But for level 1, it's just a bit higher than the OECD average at about 16.8%, and just a little bit higher below level 1. So the overall average score for the United States then was actually just a bit lower than the OECD average because of those greater number of people, students within that bracket. Now, again, one of these charts, and I did actually try and fiddle with these charts, and I got told off. And I kind of quite knew this. I've got to be a little bit careful about just how many liberties I can take. But basically what this is showing is what they tend to produce, and quite sophisticated data analysis here. And these little boxes, if you can see them, have a sort of center line, which is the actual mean of the finding. And the boundaries of the box, the reason that the box has got a width to it is that there's a 95% confidence limit. So it just qualifies really the finding. Now the United States, and there's an arrow pointing to the United States. 500 is the ringed figure, and that's the OECD average on this particular chart. So the US falls just to the left of that. The very top on to the right of that, just above 550, is Finland, and Finland always seemed to do extremely well in the PISA surveys. And I think there's probably quite a lot of work to be done on trying to understand quite why Finland does so well. Bottom on the nearer 400 is Mexico and Turkey. So that just gives you a bit of an insight there. So that's they had a larger than average, as I say, percentage of students in these lowest levels. And we love to produce these wonderful they kind of look like temperature charts, don't they? And again, the OECD, the United States there is on the right. And you can see the darker red or orange at the bottom of the lowest level 1 and 2 and below. And then you've got the lighter orange, yellows, and blues, which is the sort of mid, and the greens at the top are the level 1. And really, we use this just to show the sort of the flow that. And again, you can see that Finland on the very left-hand side has got a high percentage of students in those two top levels. Overall, about just over 20% even. So that's just an insight into PISA, and we produce from that volumes of stuff like this. And you can get PDF copies of these things from the OECD website, actually. But we've left some information by the examples by the reception desk for you to have a look at if you'd like to. So other work that's done by the Directorate generally. Education at a glance, which is another summary of the education statistics and indicators that my colleagues have put together, covering preschool education, school education, right the way through to tertiary education, looking at different effects of education in society. And this information is used often by governments and policymakers, but it's also used by teaching professions to get an understanding of what is happening, not only in their own country, but in different countries. We have a little program looking at school leadership, improving school leadership, a project looking at early childhood education as well. And indeed, we do quite a lot of work on higher education and in vocational education too. Just another brief report for you. The Schooling for Tomorrow project is a very interesting project addressing this issue of this place, I suppose you might call the future. It was running scenarios and looking at trends and trying to get a fix on what we might have to consider about the future. And in its trends analysis, it's produced a sort of tool to support long-term thinking. Actually, this isn't the tool. This is just a cartoon showing what a future was perceived to look like back in the early 20th century by a French cartoonist. And you can see the chap on the schoolmaster on the right-hand side there, loading all the books into the machine. One of the students winding the handle, and of course everybody else and all the other students have connected. Well, it's a connected society. You know, they got that bit right. A sort of surreal version of ICT, I suppose. So future thinking prediction, of course, is difficult. We don't always get it right. What my colleagues, what we've done is to actually look at it a different way. We've come up with a series of trends over society, looking at demography, ICT, aging in society, and various other issues. And the idea is to use the trends and the knowledge we have about what has been changing and the extent of change, to perhaps try and inform where change is happening now and how we might, if that change continued, need to respond to it in the future. And it's something, again, that's being used by policymakers, but a lot of people within education generally, because you could use the information to look at your own teaching practice, perhaps, or development of school programs within local areas, and so on. So just to give you a taster of these couple of these 26 indicators, and I'm afraid it's more bar charts again. We do bar charts in the OECD. This is about birth rates. In fact, birth rates have been falling well down on the 1960s, and the big red arrow there is again the United States. And that shows that in 1960 there were about 3 3/4 children per woman. Okay, 3 3/4 children. Don't you just love statistics? 3 3/4 children. By the time we get to 2003, which is the white sort of series of boxes along the lower down there, the rate was hovering around two children per woman, and that you can see that trend is across the range of OECD countries. Turkey is Mexico is the country right next to the US where it's got the highest bar, and right at the right-hand side is the Slovak Republic, with Korea actually another another bar that shows 1960 figure being about 6 children per woman. So from that, you might ask yourselves a number of questions. How to deal with emptying or closing schools, for example. If you've got fewer children, you need perhaps fewer schools. You need to rethink what you've got. And the possible reduction of school choices in some communities, it may have a wider impact than just whether there's a school building or not. And maybe another question is about, is opportunity being seized to use resources and make them go further for each student. Another trend that we've looked at, and we talked a little bit about it yesterday rather, the internet, the number of websites worldwide is increasing rapidly. And it's kind of almost a logarithmic chart there. It shows going right up to getting for over 120 million and probably reaching much higher now. Again, how do schools develop in children the capacity, the critical capacity, really, to deal with all this information? Because you've now actually got to be critical, and Stephen Heppel pointed out yesterday that actually maybe they just go and use YouTube instead. The enormous amounts of information that are on the internet, how is it affecting the dominant modes of knowledge organization, and how do we perhaps use that in learning? So that's just a brief summary of some of the things that go on elsewhere in the Education Directorate. But really coming on to my own part of the Directorate, the Programme on Educational Building. We are a self-funded unit, actually. We have to go and get our own members and make them pay. And we have sophisticated methods for doing that. We actually have 14 OECD member countries who are members, and we have 12 associate members. Some non-OECD member countries would be associate members, and indeed regions or states, provinces in other countries. Unfortunately, the United States is not a member of our program, but maybe one day we can change that, or at least encourage some of the states to become members. We're directed by a governing board which steers the work that we do, and as luck would have it, as serendipity would have it, our most recent chair of the governing board was Mukund Patel. So you've got 2 for the price of 1 here today from the OECD point of view. Mukund left in April and then went to Dubai. Our focus is actually the interaction. We're not just about the physical building itself, although we cover that. We're about the interaction of the user in the building, how education happens and how the building supports that education need. And so we do look at the fixed building itself, but we, as I say, are very interested in how this fixed building supports actually the changing needs of very dynamic changing needs of education. And we bring people together in forums of various sorts, and from policymakers, educationalists, and designers, and those providing buildings. We're quite unique, I think, in that context to be able to do that. And we also publish a range of material. One of the areas that we've been focusing a lot on, and I'll come on to in some more detail on this, is this issue about educational quality, the quality of school buildings, and how it supports education and improved education. And one of the ways we've been doing that, looking at that, is to gather together a significant number of examples of exemplary buildings. We don't call it best practice, because as soon as we do that, someone will come along with a better one. They're really just examples, exemplary buildings. And this is the 3rd edition of this compendium that we've put together. And we produce this every 4 or 5 years. Again, it's quite a long process. And indeed, the the 70-odd schools, and it includes higher education buildings included in there from a range of 20 countries. And they're selected by an international panel and jury, so who use a range of criteria from flexibility, serving community needs, sustainability, safety, and security among those, to make the judgments about what sort of buildings go in here. Therefore, it addresses how the physical infrastructure contributes to the quality of education. And I'll show you some examples from this in a moment. So yes, I'm going to come on to buildings and show you some real buildings. But on my path, on my route there, I just want to say a little bit about a project we've got running, particularly on evaluating quality, sort of aside from the compendium. And this is the Kingsdale School in London, in England. And one of the things that is quite difficult to do is to link facilities with improved student performance in a sort of quantified fashion. We have been trying to quantify it. More often, there's an increasing use of qualitative methods for looking at these. But we do know that this was a failing school that was renovated and a big roof put over the central courtyard. And since the school was renovated, the student performance has improved, and so on. And no doubt the building has had some contributory factor within that process. So the evaluation of quality has been designed around a quality framework. And we had a group of national experts work with us to define, well, what do we mean? What are the principles of quality? And they really are encapsulated, we believe, within these sort of four areas. Fitness for purpose, in other words, it's beneficial of the facility to the users generally. The facility's operational layout, in other words, does it work in terms of its layout? Symbolic, visually pleasing, inspirational, Mukund has talked about that, and it offers learning opportunities. And buildings very often, I think, are opportunity spaces as much as anything. In other words, people make new opportunities or find new opportunities in an existing space within buildings. And they have got to be healthy and safe and environmentally sustainable. So some of these principles can be found actually in buildings that are in the compendium. And so just a quick tour of that. This is Canning Vale College in Australia, which was selected for the compendium because of its fitness for purpose and benefit to the facility of users, and had a lot of flexible learning spaces within it. It was a nicely designed interior as well, and quite inspirational. A lot of light getting deep into the building again. One for symbolic and visually pleasing was a Rudolf Steiner school in Belgium, and it also focused on the play areas on the outside of the building. In other words, it's not just we don't just look at the inside interiors of building. It's the whole physical environment within which the students are in their physical context. This is a school in New Zealand, in Auckland, which was selected as healthy and safe. And again, it's one of these schools, and Mukund showed a similar example where the sort of circulation area used in a variety of ways, and you sort of think, well, actually, yes, why sometimes do we need furniture? You know, it's nice they can sit on the floor, they can use the space in a variety of ways. So other areas of work that we do on the program of educational building. We're looking and following on with some colleagues in our other divisions on looking at innovative learning environments. We've been talking a little bit about those in this conference this last day, and we'll continue to do so, I think. And we've got colleagues who are looking at innovative models of learning. In other words, what's the learning process going on, and how does it work? And we are following on looking at the implications for the physical infrastructure. And this is kind of a very exciting project for us as we begin to work on that in conjunction with our evaluation of school buildings. We're also looking at things like procurement, of how we actually get the buildings built and the whole process. And we're interested in not just when you start to build the building, but actually not just when you start to design the building, but way before that. What leads to a decision to build? And indeed, way after you've handed the keys to the poor unsuspecting client who's then got to use the building. How do they use the building? Is it usable? And how do we get that information and feed it forward into the next project and indeed learn from it? So it's a whole learning experience. And we've got a project looking at safety and security of buildings, both earthquake safety, we've done a lot of work on, and security generally, higher education buildings, and also learning environments for students with special needs. Actually, one thing I didn't say about the evaluation project was that to do this evaluation, we have developed a manual, and we're about to start actually the pilot project itself. So we've got about 6 countries, each with 1 to 5 schools contributing to this, that'll be evaluated. So it's an international spread of schools. And we're going to use a range of techniques for information, and most of it you'll be familiar with. We'll be talking to students in a range of ways, using questionnaires, as well as focus group meetings and interviews, and getting them to discuss their views on building. We'll be doing the same with staff. After all, staff have got to work in buildings, teachers and other staff as well. We'll be using classroom observation. And it struck me actually yesterday, and you might say it's a bit of a no-brainer really, but it did strike me yesterday when Stephen Heffel was talking. Actually, wouldn't it be good if in this study, and I think we should do it, and I'll certainly be talking to my colleagues, that we actually get the students to do some of the classroom evaluation, the classroom observation. Because actually, maybe, we talk about getting psychologists or people with a psychology background to do some of this, but actually, you can get a lot of insight from having the learners sort of sit back and look at how the whole process is happening in the classroom. And I think it would be tremendously beneficial to do that. So that's really about how the evaluation project will work. And we're very interested in the usability. It's not just about how well the building itself performs, but it's in terms of whether it's energy efficient and so on. But it's about usability, and it's about how we get that understanding and knowledge fed forward into other building projects, and how we use it indeed to manage the space and buildings we've got differently in the future. One thing I've not talked about, and I'll bring this to a conclusion with this reflection, is sustainability, or at least I've mentioned it. It's a cross-cutting theme in a lot of our work, the compendium and the evaluation project, performance evaluation project. And indeed, PISA has asked as one of its survey questions students about their awareness of environmental issues, and the PISA team are actually doing some analysis now, some deeper analysis of those results, which we in the program of educational building are going to be contributing by way of examples of how building the physical environment can promote the awareness of sustainability so far as students are concerned. But we're also working now, starting work on a bigger project called Education for Sustainable Development. This is following on from the UN's decade on this. Shortened often to ESD, which is rather unfortunate. It sounds like a disease. I'm just going to the ESD clinic this afternoon, you know. Anyway, the aim is to look at the interaction, again, of what happens to children, how they learn about environmental awareness, and whether it's just from the building and what they do within the building, their sort of social interactions, the curriculum, and indeed also school practices. In other words, if the school is busy talking about the importance of waste recycling, is it actually doing it? Are the staff driving to school in huge cars, for example? So we'll be looking at a range at how national policy in different countries affects the development of more localized school building policy in terms of education and sustainability. This is a picture of 3 eco-warriors from a school in Hertfordshire in the United Kingdom. That's a program run across schools to, again, promote learning about sustainability and environmental awareness within students. So to conclude then, we are very much interested in the people and the spaces actually making the places. We're not just focusing, as I say, on the spaces. And creating better learning environments is about creating better learning places. And so it's about the opportunity. It's about what students and people in schools can do within those spaces. And it's about all of us, and I am an architect by training. I'm legally, in terms of the United Kingdom, an architect, although I sit in a directorate with some educationalists, a lot of economists and statisticians, so I do tend to do the novelty act sometimes. So how do we provide better learning environments? Thank you very much. Thank you.
Alastair and Mukund, thank you. Mukund, come on up, and we have some time for them to take questions before we go to the expo. Do we have the microphones? And if those of you with the microphones, if the question isn't clear, if you would please then repeat the question. So
Thanks.
Let's get started. And who has a question?
I've got one here, Merle. I almost hate to ask this question, but by any chance, are you tracking costs for capital development and operation of schools across the world?
This is part of our FPE project, actually, and indeed we'll also be doing it for the environmental sustainability project, looking at cost and benefit of sustainability. So we'll be doing it in 2 ways. We've been trying to, over the last few years, get countries to contribute information on cost, to develop indicators on costs. It's been quite difficult, and countries have been willing to respond, but coming up with the goods, as it were, has been somewhat harder. Part of the problem has been that countries are collecting information in slightly different ways, and so what we've been trying to do is find a way of getting a level of consistency so that we can make the data truly comparable. So yes, we're working on it, is really the short answer there.
Can I just add that it's very difficult to compare international construction cost, actually. We know this because we are building schools in different countries. If the school that we are building in Dubai for 3,000 pupils will cost us $30 million. But in India, we could do it for $12 million, because the construction costs are actually much cheaper. So you get the same quality of the building at a far less cost. So to do like-for-like comparisons as for the educational attainment is very difficult on cost side. But I think what you can do is compare capital cost against running cost, because then you are in the same country, so you should be able to get some ratios and to see whether upfront investment on energy efficiency is paying off or not. You know?
Yeah.
Yes, I have a couple of questions. Oh, sorry. I'm over here.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Oh, sorry.
You'd mentioned in your presentation that there was data that showed that improving the quality of schools led to higher achievement. Is there any sort of data on that, or publications that we have available to us? And the other part of my question is, I see a lot of these examples over this weekend of places all around the world of, quality environments for learning. Don't see a lot of U.S. examples. I'm wondering, what are the impediments that you see in the U.S. towards building quality learning environments, and how do we overcome those?
Shall I go first, and then you can go on the second one? Are all these facilities, fantastic facilities, making any difference to the education attainment? I think that's very difficult, right? Education fundamentally is about teaching and learning. If you've got great teachers and you've got really sort of not very interesting places, very dull buildings, great teachers would make a difference. There is fantastic education going on in very, very poor buildings all around the world, right? Let's not be under any illusions that you need great shining palaces to deliver great education. I think it helps if you have got great facilities. Where it helps is in motivation and commitment of particularly the pupils who are not engaging with education. It also makes teachers' life much easier, right? For example, in one school in England, the staircases were so narrow. At break time, there would be a teacher at the top and the bottom of the staircase, because otherwise there'll be fights breaking out on the staircase every day. The head teacher said this to me as we walked around the school. Now, they shouldn't have to do this. This is not a good use of teachers' time. So let's design places where they're not spending a lot of time in managing. Some of the old schools, to go from one end on the third floor to the diagonally opposite ground floor, it'll take 10 minutes. So 45 minutes period, you're losing 10 minutes actually of teaching time again. So how do you have shorter circulation spaces? How can you go from one class to the other class very quickly? All these sort of things do make a difference. But I'll give you one example where it had a huge impact, and this is the school that Alastair showed, the Kingsdale School in South London, the one where they covered the roof. This school was almost a failing school. 19% of the pupils were getting A to C in 5 subjects. Now, 19% is very low. Our definition of a failing school is 20%. If you are less than 20, you would almost certainly close the school. This school was just hanging in there. And then we decided to spend a lot of money on that school, £9 million, and we did a number of workshops with pupils and teachers to see what you want to do, what sort of renovation. All the refurbishment was done, and 6 or 7 years later, the results in that school were 48% of the pupils were getting a 5 A star to C. Fantastic, phenomenal improvement. Now, I'm not saying all of it is because of the building, but the head teacher himself, Steve Morrison, will tell you the building had a huge impact on the pupils and on the community, because it told them that somebody does care. And actually, I was talking to a girl, I think she was 16-year-old, and when the building was being designed, and she was very excited because she has participated in the student council discussing with the architect the scheme. So I said to her, but you won't be here when this is completed. And she said, I know, but my brother is coming to the school next year. People begin to see a future, a better future for themselves. And I think that is what makes a difference.
Yeah, I think that's what I meant in a way about using qualitative methods of trying to get at some of this information. Indeed, in the early days of the PISA study, there was a question which tried to link buildings to this issue of student performance, and it was very difficult. It didn't seem to show very much of a link at all. Now, it might have been that the wrong question was asked, and we have indeed tried to have more questions put into the PISA survey, but it's such a big survey that actually they're focusing really on the more curriculum issues, and they've got 108 questions just on the science literacy aspect, so you can see just how big it is. So yes, I mean, this is really what we're trying to get at within this performance evaluation project of ours, is to try and get some real understanding and pick out, try and really identify these factors. And again, we're not looking really at making comparisons across different countries between each of these schools, simply because, again, the context is different, rather like for costs. But it would be very enlightening to get some kind of real deep understanding about what might be the similarities across them, just on one or two factors, rather than the overall performance evaluation.
Okay. Next question.
I've had the opportunity to become exposed to your work over the last year, and I found it just, some of the schools are just beautiful. But when you're looking at a desperate poverty and really doesn't even have the government, to start that community building process? How do you get the engagement of the community coalescing around that project, and then bring in the financing to make it work in a country that may just be a desperate country with great poverty?
But I think there is, even in these countries, there is a lot of interest in education. There is a lot of willingness as well to turn things around. Take South Africa. But education for also start a lot of self-help projects or small scale projects. You don't need shiny, great buildings, right? Let's be clear about this. I think not many countries have 30, 40 million pounds to spend on single school. So I think we need to look at models where small rural schools can also deliver good education. And I think this is where the use of technology I think we really have an opportunity now to reach out to those communities. Just as the mobile telephone transformed the world of communication, I think that through the use of ICT, we can bring education to all communities around the world as well. And I think we are beginning to see some examples of it. There's a long way to go yet, of course, but I think we need to share the knowledge much more widely. I think in one of the workshops, we looked at Jordan. I think the colleagues are here perhaps from Jordan. They talked about doing so. I think the model is not necessarily always the big schools. I think that's fine for here or England or Dubai, but I think there are different models for different countries.
Yeah, so UNICEF is doing some work on this area, and it's going to publish, and it's, I think, a month or two off, actually, a whole manual, some more stuff on its website on this. So it's worth just keeping an eye open for that, I think. But as Mukund says, really, although we've been showing kind of some glitzy schools and inspirational schools, because of course, aesthetic, they can be inspirational places, they should be.
Yeah.
It's not just about the aesthetic, it's about whether the whole physical environment works and allows you to do what it is you need to do. So it is important for us all just to remember that, I think.
Yeah. Sorry, while I was answering this question, I also realized that we didn't answer the second part of the question over there, that why haven't we shown any American schools? You've got some great schools going on here, and I think the reason that I haven't shown any is that I didn't have the right slides with me. But certainly I've seen schools in Maryland and other places which have been really inspiring. A lot of innovation going on as well, especially around vocational education. So I think you've got some great examples, and I think they're all on display outside in the exhibition as well.
Yes, and we very much want to, at the OECD, hear about these examples. And of course, coming here has been great insight for us, because we would like to publish in our next compendium. I'm sorry, it sounds as if I'm plugging the compendium, doesn't it? But it is an important information resource that goes far and wide. The examples that you've got in the country, and next year, at the end of this year, we'll be starting work on the development of the next compendium. So, and I'll be certainly in touch with CEFPI, CEFPI. Sorry, I keep calling it CEFPI. This is because we're in acronym mode, and you don't, of course. So we do very much want to include.
Okay. There's a question over there. Yeah.
Great presentation. And I have a follow-up question with regard to promising avenues for inquiry for us. You talked about, and we find this all the time, I happen to chair CFPI's research committee, and we have a hard time figuring out how to isolate the variables. How do you isolate good teaching and learning from the building? But there are certain pieces of research we always go back to, the Heshong Malone studies on daylighting and how it potentially increases test scores. And I know it's a very complicated issue, but I would love for you to address two questions. One being promising avenues for inquiry, what you think we can really pursue and get some good answers to questions. And the other one is, in addition to daylighting, are there any other findings that you have that are just very clear that we can quote, use in our future work and in our designs? Thank you.
Sort of answering question 2 first. Yes, there are studies. Yes, I agree. I mean, there are studies that have been done on where some of these variables, if you like, lighting and acoustics, have been isolated, and also the use of and also temperature and humidity. Another study I know of has been done and has shown that affects. I think it was math test scores that we used as a way of looking at that one. So we can talk afterwards, and if you give me your business card, I can send you some information that I've got on that from the research. Promising avenues for inquiry. I think one of the difficulties, in a way, we can't separate out all these variables. I think there are a whole series of things that's so dynamic, it's so interconnected, that it's actually just very difficult. And I think we've come to the conclusion that we need to look at the thing holistically to try and get a rounded overall view of this, and perhaps, although it's almost the holy grail to try and definitely say that 97% of the student score, et cetera, was down to the building. It is extremely difficult. And one issue might be, well, of course, buildings also affect the teachers, and you might say, well, if the teacher is having to wrestle with this environment to get it enabled to change the room setting so they can have different learning environments and so on. Maybe there's a line of inquiry there. Maybe that's a route in, because there is a sort of another connection with student performance. If the teacher can't facilitate the student learning because they're kind of wrestling with the physical environment. So.
Yeah. Just add that the physical environment does have an impact on education attainment, right? While we can't be sure whether inspirational PACEs might, I think the lighting and all of that does, and there are studies on that. And one aspect of a physical environment which is absolutely crucial is acoustics, and it is often not that well thought of in quite a few environments. If a child often at the back of the class is not paying much attention, it's not because they're not interested, it's sometimes because they can't hear. And that is very difficult to pick up. If the lighting on the board is not adequate, then people will realize and they'll tell you. But hearing is very different, because you grasp some of the words and you can't grasp the others, and you don't know what you're missing. So I think acoustics is absolutely crucial, and also indoor air quality as well, and in particular ventilation. I think we should monitor the carbon dioxide levels, and once they start reaching up to about 3,000 parts per million or more, then I think concentration starts slipping as well. You need fresh air, you need sort of turnover ventilation in buildings as well. So I think we need to think about indoor environment and acoustics and air quality in particular. Any more questions? There's one at the back there.
Thank you. Mr. Blyth, this is a question for you. You showed some fascinating statistics about test scores or achievement across countries. Would it be more useful, for example, you had an example of Finland consistently coming to the top in terms of math and science scores. but would it be more useful to have context and homogeneity of culture or lack of when you're doing those kinds of statistics to make it a little bit more, relevant?
Yes, I mean, the analysis that's done on these statistics does look at context. The fact that but one issue that I have indeed asked my colleagues who work on this about, because it always struck me, well, you've got Finland with 5 million people, very small population. You've got other countries, and obviously the United States with far bigger populations. Surely, that explains the difference. I am told they say no. They've actually looked at this issue, and it has no makes no distinct difference between the scores. But yes, I mean, we're really just providing information what's happening, and then as you say, yes, you can have a contextual analysis which kind of looks at different issues around culture, because I think you're right. I think there is an issue there about culture, and we've been discussing this in the office quite a lot recently.
Yeah. I think it is very difficult to draw sort of real comparisons. Finland, fantastic results, but also often a troubled country. Recent events really, you need to address what impact all this is having, as well. And also some of the Asian countries, Japan, Korea perhaps, really a lot of parental support for education, a lot of interest as well, perhaps far more than in many European countries, which is reflected in the grades as well. So I think the cultural context is important as well, but I think it's difficult to filter that out in this sort of statistical exercise.
Yes, yeah, yes. Yeah. Okay, have we got another?
Sorry, a couple of questions here. Yeah.
Mine is an excellent question. I just wanted to offer for the audience in response to the research question is at our Pacific Northwest conference this year, we had a great presentation from a Canadian academic who started with your PISA data on facilities and looked at the building condition index surveys and then did some of his own kind of digging in terms of how do you make that relevant. So he was trying to get his arms around the big picture as you talked about instead of the individual components. And that, I can't remember his name, but his presentation is on the CEFP conference website right now, so you can actually download it and look at his slides.
Thank you very much. That's very useful to have that. Thank you.
Another question there?
You showed some great examples of sustainable design projects. The question is that in countries like Dubai, where money is really no object, is there an awareness to promote sustainable design in the United Arab Emirates, for example?
I mean, even in Dubai, the money is a problem. Certainly it is for us as a company who are building schools. We are putting in a lot of investment in there, and we have very tight criteria for investing as well. We want a return on the investment. So money is an issue. In terms of sustainability, and I mean, I think Dubai, I think the Worldwide Fund for Nature did an analysis of the worst performing countries environmentally. And you'll be pleased to hear that the United States was second, that average American needs resources. They came to the conclusion average American need resources from 8.2 hectares a year to sustain their lifestyle. And the number one on the Worldwide Fund for Nature, the country was Dubai, where an average inhabitant needs resources for 11.2 hectares to sustain their lifestyle. So Dubai has got a lot to do in terms of sustainability. I think there is a lot of awareness. Certainly, all of our buildings will be LEED certified. Incidentally, I think we need another conference on how good is LEED, and but that's something else. But to me, sustainability not just about tick boxes. It is actually about pupils doing it as well. You can have a great sustainable building, but if you leave the lights on and everything else, then it's not going to have much impact. So I think you need to embed sustainability in the lifestyle as well of the school. But I think there is a far greater awareness on sustainability, and certainly schools and other buildings are trying to do things. Yeah.
You mentioned that with an electronic whiteboard under a tree, you can deliver a good education. But have you come across any well-financed schools that were failing? And if so, why?
Sorry, well-financed schools.
Well-financed schools that are failing.
There are well-financed, shiny new school buildings as well that are not, where the pupils are not achieving as much as the expectations were. I think it is very difficult. It's about school leadership. It's about the community in where the school is, the support from the community as well. All those issues do come in. But the Academies program in England, for example, which is the flagship program for Prime Minister Tony Blair, where a lot of money went into these schools. These schools were built in deprived areas where there was a failing school. The failing school was closed. A shiny new building with signature architecture. Norman Foster did 8 of them, were built. Some of them were very successful, but some of them just, really continued, but struggling schools. So I think there are a lot of issues around. It's not just the building. It is about teaching and learning. It is about leadership. It is about support as well from the business, industry, and community. One more? No?
All right.
I think they want coffee.
Mukund and Alastair, thank you very, very much.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you.
Just before we go to break, I wanted to comment on the environmental sustainability issue of us being number 2. We sit in Starbucks lines in the drive-thrus. We have 10 to 15 at a time, cars that keep their engines running, and you got to get those SUVs warmed up. And so I think that's probably what accounts for those large hectares that we need in the U.S. And McDonald's and Jack in the Box too. Your program, the times are different, which thank you, Bill, for pointing some of that out to me, that your regional meetings are at 4:30. Also at the exhibit hall, the drawings will be going on this afternoon. We will be going through the exhibit hall and giving out different drawings. If you would also exchange would you let the registration desk know if you're coming tomorrow night for dinner, just so that we can get a final count? We need that. That would very much be appreciated. One other thing that I thought was, all the things that you did, the two of you, and my mind is swarming with ideas of maybe the ways that we can think to improve learning. That quote by the high-tech high student, and I hope I wrote it down right, but the building that allows them to want to learn rather than containing the learning resources. That really says it all to me about what our students are really thinking about. They want a place that they want to learn. I think with that, let's head out to the break and go into the exhibit hall and the learning, go into our former mini sessions. Thanks for this morning.